How's it going, everyone? Looks like we have, well, not a packed house, but yeah, let's bring the panelists out as well. Come on out. Excellent. Better to do it all at once, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, you can take a seat. Well, thanks so much for being with us, everyone. I'm Gavin Bate. I'm editor of Utility Dive. We're an electric utility trade publication based out of Washington, D.C. We focus primarily on the American power sector. And I'm just so excited to be up here talking about staging distributed energy projects. We're talking about moving from vision to reality. And when we talk about that, we're not just talking about moving from the vision of a singular microgrid or a singular solar plus storage project, moving that from the vision stage to the reality. That's certainly part of it, but we also want to talk about, taking the learnings from these projects that utilities and other parties can get and relating them to the larger grid, taking the vision of a distributed grid from these little pilot projects and relating them to the larger system. We have an all-star panel here to discuss this with us today. To my left is Zpryme. She's the Director of Smart Grid and Technology at Commonwealth Edison, the Chicago-based utility. She says she has the coolest job in the world.
I second that.
To her left is Carl Popham. He is the Manager of Emerging Technology and Electric Vehicles at Austin Energy, the host utility here at ETS. We're very excited to have him today. Thanks for being with us, Carl. Fantastic. And next to him, we've got David Kisia. Correct me. Correct me.
I went over this. Chiesa.
Yeah. Chiesa. And that's exactly how I wrote it, too. In any case, so yeah, now I've, already we've had a good rapport on the panel, as you can see. But in any case, Mr. Chiesa is the Senior Director of Business Development at S&C Electric. Next to him, we have Jamie Statter. She is the Vice President of Strategic Relationships at the U.S. Green Building Council. And without further ado, I would just like our panelists to kind of give a short intro about why they're here and what their role is in the distributed energy space, for no other reason than to stop me talking. So Shay, go ahead. Tell us what ComEd is doing in Chicago.
Thank you, Gavin. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I'm Zpryme, the Director of Smart Grid and Technology at ComEd. My team's responsibility is to look ahead and looking into how technologies, emerging technologies, can benefit our customers and our stakeholders, and putting a technology roadmap in place. The other thing that we are looking into is how we can utilize smart grid infrastructure that has been put in place as part of Energy Infrastructure Modernization Act can be utilized for other things like smart city applications. If you heard from Anne yesterday talking about different business models, what we do in smart grid and technology is what are the infrastructure needs and requirements for that future business models, and what measurements and capabilities we need to put in place. So going back to Gavin's questions in talking about distributed energy resources. In 2015, ComEd introduced the legislation in Springfield, and part of the package was asking for building 6 microgrids around critical infrastructure. And one of them, the one that specifically I was asked to talk about, is Bronzeville microgrid. The microgrid is about a 10 megawatt. We have envisioned a 10 megawatt microgrid around the neighborhood in south side of Chicago that has that includes like a cross-sectional type of customers, including City of Chicago, a police headquarters. And during the process of panel, I'm sure that I'm going to talk more about the project and the learnings and where we are at with that.
Thanks so much, Shay. Thanks for that intro. Carl, can we turn to you next and talk about your role at Austin Energy and some of the stuff that you're doing around DERs as well?
Certainly. So Carl Popham with Austin Energy. I want to welcome all our out-of-town guests here to Austin. I'm also excited that ETS moved back to the Paramount Theater in Stateside. It's just a great, historic, very good vibe. I just remember even seeing shows going to college here and just growing up. So it's wonderful to be here and have all y'all here share in this space. I'm also impressed, usually on a panel is my name, Popham, is normally the one that gets mispronounced, but you nailed it, so thank you for that. So, you know, why I'm here, or what I'm representing, so I represent a very, very smart and capable team called Electric Vehicles and Emerging Technologies. So one is the electric vehicle side of the house. We do a lot in that space. We have a program called Plug-in Everywhere and Plug-in Partners. And there's a lot of programs and activities as theirs. And we own the operational side of that as well. So that's just a program that's near and dear to my heart. On the emerging tech side, which is more of the focus today, a lot of our focus is on achieving our very aggressive goals set by City Council. So we are the 8th largest public power municipal-owned utility. And so one of those goals is a 55% renewable generation goal by 2020, and we actually expect to make it ahead of time of where we're at. And that's mostly through aggressive PPAs through wind and solar. And then specifically from distributed energy resources, which is going to be my focus of discussion today, we have goals around distributed solar, and as well as energy storage goals. And so we were a recipient of a Shines grant for $4.3 million. As well as a grant from the state of Texas, a TCQ Innovation Grant, as well as funding from one of our partners, Ideal Power, and then funding from the city, to put together a project that the vision is to integrate in a very smart way and an affordable way storage and solar both at a grid scale, so we're integrating our new community solar system with a grid scale battery, integrating solar at the commercial level, and then integrating solar and storage behind the meter at a customer's residences. And ultimately make all those tiers or all those scopes and sizes of storage and solar through smart inverters, advanced communications, and system controls, all working together like a virtual power plant, because in my view, I don't think you have to choose between the benefits of centralized distribution and the benefits of decentralized. I think if done correctly, you can take the best of both worlds. So that's why I'm here today, to better understand that, to learn from all y'all and share what I know in that space.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. David, I want to turn to you next. You're the vendor on the panel here.
Sure.
Can you talk about your role at S&C and what you guys do for DERs?
Absolutely. So I'm David Chiesa. I'm the Senior Director for Business Development for S&C Electric Company. So just a quick show of hands, how many people out here think that S&C Electric Company is a utility? Okay, after he said that we were a supplier, none of you should say that, but just check and see if you're actually awake. No, we've been around for 104 years. We actually started off we're founded by 2 engineers that worked for ComEd that created the liquid fuse. So the liquid fuse and its predecessors from 1906 is still in use today, right? So when we go and we look at some of the protection schemes that are put out by utilities, it incorporates, you know, it's no longer liquid, now it's a solid, but it still has that same protection fuse associated with that. So, you know, that's early 1900s technology. We look at other technologies out there like a recloser. The patent on a recloser was filed in the 1950s. So if you're good at math, you know that that's at least 60 years old. So when we look at all this, we say, you know, there's this need for new technology. And that's where S&C comes into the mix. And we want to provide these new technologies to take the grid from what we call the old grid into the smart grid. It's not a bad grid. It still works today. It does a great job. It does most of what we need. But the smart grid, you know, the newer methodology of doing things, each one of the devices has to have some intelligence. Each one of the devices has to have the ability to communicate. Because if you're going to make the vision that Austin Energy and that ComEd want to come true, they need people like us to be out there working on the technology. They work on how to put it together and how to make money at it. But we talk about, you know, what's that technology that you need? How can we develop it for you and make sure that it does all the things that you need it to do to enable you to realize what's going on in the system. So it's a really fun place to work. We're employee owned, so you get kind of a different vibe in terms of you know, working there versus a publicly owned company. But you know, the speed of innovation that we go through at S&C is actually a lot of fun. And so it gives me an opportunity to work with great people like our utility friends over here. So that's what I'm hoping to talk about today, is how we help take that vision into reality from the equipment side, and then fit it into the structures that the utilities use.
Fantastic, fantastic. And in the interest of full disclosure, you have some relationships with the parties up here, yes?
I do, absolutely. I've known Shay for 6 years. We used to work together. Shay didn't say it, but she's an S&C alum. And she also happens to be wearing West Point's colors today, which is outstanding. I know down here is probably a lot of Texas A&M fans, but not in Austin, of course. And of course, Jamie with the U.S. Green Building Council, we're a supporter of the U.S. Green Building Council and their program on Peer, which I'm sure she's going to talk about.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, Jamie, I want to turn to you next. We've got two utilities and a vendor up here. Some people may wonder, what is the role of the U.S. Green Building Council in microgrids and distributed energy projects? Can you elucidate that a little bit for us?
Sure, and thank you again. I'm also very excited to be here. Love it here in Austin. It's always a treat to come down. So as you noted, David, I am here representing a new program called Peer, which, of course, US GBC from the LEED Green Building Rating System, which is just about 20 years old. We certify about 1 billion square feet a day globally. We operate in hundreds of countries around the world, and really just considering how early it is in the development of LEED, just a couple decades, a little less than, it's pretty remarkable the progress that the rating system has been able to make. And of course, Austin had an important founding role in LEED, and is something that we want to highlight every time we're here. For years, people would then come to us and ask us where we could be more impactful in other spaces, in energy, in land, in water, in cities, and can we develop a LEED-like rating system for those criteria? And at GBCI, which is the certifying body of LEED, we realized that, in fact, our core competency is not creating a rating system, but rather bringing an existing rating system to market and building that market around it, using third-party verification as a tool to drive market transformation, so that we can be definitional in any given space. So we acquired the Peer rating system almost 2 years ago. Peer was developed out of Chicago by an organization called the Perfect Power Institute, looking at how to define microgrid, smart grid, these very opaque terms for the customer at least, and create a rating system that could be definitional, much like LEED was for green buildings. Because if you look back 20 years, customers were saying, we want a green building, we want a sustainable building, and no one really knew what that was. And the customer couldn't negotiate with their architect or engineers to get to that point because there was nothing to get to. So we're hopeful that with the Peer rating system, we can help you all in your efforts to get to the modern grid by being definitional and using third-party verification to do that. So that's my pitch on Peer.
Just to follow up quickly, so if I'm a utility or a DER provider, why do I want that certification?
Do you want to take that?
Well, I would love to. We'll tag team.
Okay, I'll start. Well, if you are a utility, you want that certification because it says you're doing what you say you're doing. It is a third party coming in and going through an incredibly vigorous metrics-based approach and putting a stamp, yes, we are providing the ultimate value for our investors. We are, in fact, performing at the levels that we say we perform at. Our resiliency is at this numeric value. That's what it provides. Hopefully in the future, people will be able to start demanding Peer-rated systems, much like people demand LEED-rated buildings. So that's the direction we're hopeful. What do you think?
Well, and from my standpoint, one of the things I get from our customers is they come to us and they say, okay, so we understand you have this great technology, and you say that it's going to provide these benefits that are going to move us from A to C. But we have to go back to a commission and talk about that and say, show me that what the investment you did actually moved you from A to C. And then if you're good with that, the next time we go to the commission, we have credibility, and we could say, yep, last time we did this, so you can expect the next time we did this, and there'll be a third-party company, not the utility, that is actually out there verifying that that's going to go on. And you had one of the best simple definitions of that I've heard of. So can you repeat that?
No, I can't.
Oh.
We've chatted backstage, and from a utility perspective, I'll share. I told you could own that. That could be. I wrote that for you.
I know, but I felt bad about claiming it that quick.
Claim it. But no, I mean, what we look at these rating systems from a utility perspective is a big part of our business is not only baselining, but comparing ourselves to other utilities that are generally our size and makeup. So by having a standard that starts getting traction, we can answer the question, well, that's great, but you know, for a lot of people, it doesn't make sense until you can compare yourself to others. So that's what we like about it.
I would say the one thing we haven't hit on in this that I think is most clear as a tool for the utilities, for the customers, for campuses, users of the system, is that we now have a roadmap that you can build to. So if you want to enter into 10 to 20 years of improvements, that's great. You have a lot of people involved in that process, a lot of stakeholders. Now everyone is building to the same standard.
Fantastic. Yeah, we could talk about certifications all day, but we've got only a limited amount of time here. I want to turn back to the utilities and your specific projects here under the SHINES grants. You know, a big goal for a lot of utilities when they put out a microgrid project or they put out a DER pilot is to learn a little bit more about how they can operate distributed resources on the grid, right? Shay, I wonder if you can speak to the Bronzeville project a little bit more, explain how that's teaching you guys about the distribution grid and how to integrate and manage more distributed energy.
That's a very good question. The way, as you mentioned, one of the learnings that we are hoping to gain along the process of this microgrid is integration of distributed energy resources. All these equipment coming from different manufacturers, and most of the time they talk with different protocols and languages, and integrating all these pieces together and putting in place a monitoring system and measurement that can facilitate the operation of those is one of the things we are trying to learn. More specific about Bronzeville, it's a utility envisioned microgrid right by Illinois Institute of Technology microgrid. They have a 9 megawatt microgrid that they can go on island and mount. So from a technical standpoint, and the way we see this project, we want to cluster these two microgrids and make them talk to each other. Mm-hmm. From a technical standpoint, this is the first time that in the world, I'm still comfortable saying that there are two microgrids talking to each other and sharing assets and communicating. We have received a grant from Department of Energy, $1.2 million to create a microgrid controller that makes this conversation happen. From a business model perspective, it's unique by its own in a way that behind the meter microgrid, a campus microgrid, working and sharing assets and resources with a utility-owned microgrid is again novel and unique. In a way that creates that makes the operation borders of a utility versus a behind the meter privately very blurry. Mm-hmm. Right now, we have the demarcation is very clear that this is behind the meter and that's the customer facilities and the other side is a utility. But then getting to this future world of a lot of these assets, capital investment on the behind the meter, and if we have some sort of mechanism to utilize those behind the meter when there's some sort of emergencies on the other side, it's something that we are hoping to learn along the process.
Fantastic, fantastic. Carl, I wonder if you can piggyback off that and talk about some of the learnings that you guys are looking for out of your system from the SHINES grant. How is this going to help you, learn how to manage distributed resources on the grid?
Well, certainly. There's the technical component of doing integration like this, which is interesting and important. But what I really want to learn is how can we develop real programs and real customer value. And I'm not interested in basically 4 megawatts of storage and 4 megawatts of distributed solar all integrated for the sake of it. I want that to be stage one of a much bigger program. And per our metrics, we need to have it as a bigger program. So here in Austin, we have about 4,000 rooftop solar today. To meet our goals, we need to basically 4 times that to get to there. So continue for quite a bit of penetration on distributed solar assets, as well as community solar programs and some other programs where it's the right time, it's the right place, But if we cannot do it affordably and figure out the business cases, not only at the grid level, but at the commercial and even the residential, I don't think we get where we need to go. So keep in mind, this is a 39-month project. We kicked it off February 1. So we have a ways to go yet to develop and work with stakeholders on developing these programs. And that's where I want to see. So when we negotiated our statement of project objectives and metrics with our biggest investor, U.S. Department of Energy, is they have some metrics as part of the shine. So we got a $4.3 million investment from them, and they do have system LCOE, or levelized cost of energy, metrics to meet, as well as technical metrics. But ultimately, and we're very in sync with those, we want to meet or exceed those and roll out a much bigger program to meet our goals.
Fantastic, fantastic. You know, one of the big goals of the SHINES program is to bring down the cost of solar storage integration to around, solar plus storage integration, to around 14 cents per kilowatt hour. I wonder if you guys can speak a little bit to how you hope your learnings and your pilot projects here can help people bring down the cost of that solar storage. And what does that mean for the wider grid?
So, as you said, the mission of the Sunshot program is to get the economics down to 14 cents per kilowatt hour. One way of looking at this is working with manufacturers, MIT labs and national labs, working on how they can make the different components more cost effective. The solar energy storage, and you see that the cost curve is coming down, at least for solar more aggressive than storage. Mm-hmm. The part that we are going to play a role as a utility is how we can optimally operate those assets and making them work in an efficient way to get the economics better. And how does that translate into what we have committed to the DOE? As I mentioned earlier, we have received a grant to develop a microgrid controller. As part of the Sunshot, we are going to develop sophisticated algorithms for load forecast based on the history of customer behavior, as well as solar forecast, and marrying these two and putting those algorithms within that microgrid controller and moving away from centralized control into distributed, decentralized control, and optimally operating the system. Mm-hmm. So that's the role that we are going to improve those economics. The other thing that we have committed to the DOE is working with our partners on improving the capabilities of smart inverters. Mm-hmm. How we can, what are the components of smart inverter, reactive power or voltage control needs to be added into existing smart inverter in order to control the system more efficiently and improve the economics.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Carl, do you have anything to add? How are you guys looking to integrate solar more effectively?
Yeah, and that DOE, that system LCOE is kind of a confusing number in my viewpoint, because a lot of people who deal with LCOE more look at a generation asset, and 14 cents doesn't cut it for Texas. It might work for Hawaii or even California, but that's not a target that we're looking at being a generation asset. So what we're looking at doing is really capturing all the potential value streams of integrating these. So that includes ultimately to successfully integrate more distributed energy resources, more renewable energy into our grid in an effective manner. And so the value streams for us includes everything from arbitrage to power quality type programs, to ERCOT ancillary services or market participation. And so we're targeting about 10 different value streams to really, and they're not mutually exclusive, that we want to test out and prove out and see where the real winners are. There's also everything around peak shaving and demand charge reduction, and it's just there is a lot of things that go into realizing value of what this system really means, and it's less about the commoditize of purchase power agreement or the generation asset. Sure. It's more about a bigger vision of how can we successfully make the balance, almost a new normal as the genie's already out of the bottle. So any utility thinks that they're not going through a distributed energy resource evolution within their service territory, it's kind of doing themselves a disservice, in my opinion. So our viewpoint is, rather than fighting that, is how can we be ahead of the curve and work with our customers who want to do that and the early adopters to figure out really a triple win between the utility, between the customers, and then the grid operator, ERCOT.
Fantastic. I've kept it with the utility folks for a while, but David, how do you see some of these microgrid projects, expanding the learnings about system management and
Sure.
reducing costs all over the grid? How do you see it from a supplier's perspective?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I always kind of chuckle a little about, and this may not sound great, but I'm going to say it anyway, why not? So as we look at this, we've done energy storage now for almost 12 years, right? We have 175 megawatts installed. We actually have every single use case as defined by EPRI actually in the field and working. But at the same time, every time we go and we talk to a utility that hasn't actually done that type of project yet, they always talk to us about their pilot program. And we go, well, that's great. We appreciate that. And we understand that you've got to do a pilot program, and we get that. We did ours 10 years ago. And so we can come in and help you move that curve along and do that. But on some level, you kind of have to do these things on your own a little bit. A pilot is a pilot for you, and it's a pilot for you and your organization, your business to learn about it. And if somebody else has already done it, that doesn't necessarily carry the same weight as if you did it yourself. And so we always have to step back and go, look, I understand we did our pilots years and years and years ago, but we have to do them. So for us, we can't wait for the day when we finished all the pilots. For us, that's going to be a glorious and wonderful day, because it's going to be great to move this from the vision into the reality, to take it back to to what we're talking about, is as those pilots finish and people start to recognize that these benefits are real, these paradigms exist, you can stack the benefits that you're talking about from these different use cases, and it will actually benefit the customer, that your customer, not just you, but benefit your customer. That's when these things are really going to take off. And if you look at the cost curves and how these things happen, what's really going to make this take off is, when we're talking about both energy storage and then microgrids, what's going to make it take off is when somebody figures out how to finance it, right? If you look at wind and solar as the large financial institutions, no matter who they were, figured out a great structure for financing based off of a PPA and known revenue streams, wow, those things took off, and it's actually the proliferation and volume achieved through that is what's driving the price down associated with those technologies. So as soon as somebody figures that out for both energy storage and microgrids, we're going to see the same thing happen. The price is already coming down as suppliers like me get more familiar and more efficient in how we present the solutions. But once that financing part figures out and the volume starts to spike, you'll see the cost come down, because Carl's absolutely right. 14 cents is not lighting anybody's anybody's candle on fire. So as we're that was good, right?
Candle on fire. Yes, that's what candles do.
Yeah. Anyway, so as we're going through that, you have to get lower to make it really grid scale type or grid parity in terms of that. So that's what we're hoping for. So we understand the pilots, but we're really there in the long term, waiting for the day the volume really kicks in.
Yeah. So to kind of break out of that pilot purgatory that we see, you say it's the financing needs to be there, and we need to get a single model of how to, kind of standardize how to spread these projects all around, correct?
Yeah, and we get lots of people that come to us and say, hey, we can't wait to finance this. Just give us a predictable revenue stream. And for energy storage and microgrids, that's tough.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things that I always hear from utilities is like, we would love to, with all of our batteries we have out on the grid, we would love to be able to do those multiple use cases, but we need to be able to see them first and control them. I was talking to some folks in California.
On their own system, not somebody else's.
Exactly. So, I think, isn't that one of the goals here, so that you guys can see better the batteries and the solar you have on the system, so that, you can know when, okay, this factory has their battery for backup power, but they're not using it right now, so then we can use it for peak shaving or renewables integration or whatever. That visibility is a big part of these projects, is it not?
Exactly. Visibility and measurement, having the line of sight on those equipments like storage or any kind of distributed energy resources, and having the capability with smart inverter or other types of control, to utilizing them during peak hour. It's one of the learnings of these type of projects.
Excellent.
I would just
Jim,
add what we're hearing from talking to everyone and trying to really be a tool for this larger market to take off is that in no case is the same set of technologies or the same set of solutions going to work in Project A, Project B, Project C. So it's on the innovators at the utilities to really figure out what is the appropriate technology mix, what is the appropriate suite of interventions that you can take in any given system, and then provide the metrics and rigor around that to make the business case. And I think one area that we have some work to do as an industry as a whole is around how to quantify the reliability and resiliency components, because that really is something on the microgrid level that isn't necessarily $1 per kilowatt hour or 14 cents per kilowatt hour, but that is incredibly valuable for customers. And when you look at long-term multi-week outages, that does have a dollar value associated with it. How do you put that in a financial model from the front end?
Absolutely. So I think one of the big questions as utilities start to do more pilot projects and they build out more distributed resource projects is the business model question, like who owns it, right? And we see a lot of utilities, whether it's ComEd or Austin Energy or, people around the country say, okay, well, with these pilot projects, we want to get the learning, so we want to own it and operate it ourselves. But obviously there's pushback from DER providers who would say, well, we want you to open this up. This shouldn't become the norm that the utility, owns all of these microgrids and distributed resource projects. I wonder if you guys, could speak to that, Carl. Like, what is your, your strategy going forward? Is Austin Energy going to try to own more of these projects, or, is this like just to learn about it and then you can open up the market later?
Yeah, I mean, for the pilot, we'll be owning and operating most of it, with the notable exception of the commercial aggregator. We do want a third party because it's important for us to learn how a third party goes about it as well with a targeted customer segment. So we're not even in the pilot, we're not saying we're going to have to own and operate everything because we want to learn from that. But yes, without a doubt, we will see ownership of these systems, and we already have a lot of private ownership of our distributed solar and rooftop. Now, we may rebate and do value of solar and other things to promote that installation, but it's customer owned and operated. So I don't see why there needs to be a specific exception to a battery. However, where it makes sense, and that's part of where we want to learn, is the use cases and the value proposition. Where it makes sense, that's my goal, is what makes the most financial sense and the most value to the ultimate end customer is where I want to go with it. So I don't think we have a preconceived notion, and we're open to all those business models.
David, what do you think from the vendor's perspective? Are you comfortable with these utilities, owning and operating these things in the pilot phase? But, and what happens when they do break out of that pilot purgatory? Right. What are your opinions on who should own and operate these things?
This may not be popular, but for me, the market's already crazy enough, right? We have, in all 50 states, we have in many of them multiple utilities, so we have tons of different people that you have to keep track of as customers. If you then multiply that out further and you further cede control over what's going on in the grid down to even lower levels, I mean, it starts to get kind of crazy and really difficult to manage. And I know that we're into chaos and all that, but chaos at some level is chaos. It's it's not controlled, and that makes it kind of tough. So from our perspective, we look at it, if people are going to build microgrids, we say, okay, so how many of these people have bucket trucks, right? How many of these people have qualified, well-trained linemen to actually go out there and maintain these systems? It's kind of like when you ask John Dillinger why he robbed banks, he said, well, that's where the money is, right? For us, if you're going to build microgrids or you want somebody to control microgrids, you kind of go, who has the skill set? Who knows how to actually design one, maintain one, build one, and then ideally make money off of it? For us, it looks a lot like a utility, right? Whether that's an IOU or a COU, or in some cases, a really large power user, like a US Steel or somebody like that, that has a large campus-based utility system, but they have knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to maintain that. So for us, we'd love to see it be centered on utilities, so, customer-owned or investor-owned, That's what our preference would be. How it's actually going to happen, we have absolutely no idea. Because chaos theory in some way is going to affect that, and the finances are going to affect it even more. The rules, the regulation, how fast change can occur. But we would love, from a company perspective, to see that with the utilities, because we feel like they have the best knowledge, skills, and ability to operate it.
Mm-hmm. Jamie, I wonder if you have any findings from the Green Building Council that, investor-owned microgrids, or I'm sorry, utility-owned microgrids versus third parties, or, because I know you guys do a lot of work with certifying, entire municipal utilities or cities as well. What's your take on this kind of ownership debate?
Well, I mean, without weighing in on it one way or the other, I think for us, what we're looking to do is just stimulate microgrid development as a whole, because it does have sort of mission-focused benefits, sustainability, reliability, resiliency, all of those things, especially when you're talking about increasing the amount of distributed resources across the grid. What does seem like it might happen is there's this sweet spot, as David was referencing, of this campus, and Austin is a perfect example where actually the first peer certified project is UT. The entire campus is certified. It's able to function more or less as a microgrid. And there are really qualified people running that campus. We've also certified the entire municipal utility in Chattanooga, so the entire city is peer certified. I think those are pretty obvious examples of a utility or an operator that can function like a utility and in partnership with their utility. I think where you're going to see a lot more gray area is around some of these new greenfield developments that are mixed use. So Hudson Yards in New York City is building a microgrid. Places like that where who runs that, who owns it, what happens next, how does the utility interact? There's a lot of question marks around things like that, and I'm just not sure which way it's going to land. For us, it's if you build, our point is build it right, and then hopefully everything will be much easier to manage when it's done. And
so Gavin, I would add one thing to everything that panelists mentioned about business model. Mm-hmm. The whole ecosystem calls for different participants. So it's not just the third party versus utility. The way we see this from campus, industrial campuses, universities, or behind the meter type, it would totally make sense that developers step in and start, like, from a financing perspective to getting the project going. That's the part that they would play a role. Mm-hmm. From a utility perspective, we see ourselves playing a role where we need to protect larger consumer interest. So around critical infrastructure, that's a place that the capabilities that need to be protected for during any catastrophic events. For safety, safe operation of those facilities, for resiliency and security, it makes sense that utility own and operates microgrid around those critical infrastructure. That's the place that we see our future role as a utility.
Fantastic, and that's kind of goes off what Anne was saying yesterday, and in kind of where she calls them hypotheses. We might have a role for this, and our socialization aspect may make us able to do this. In any case, that really leads back into my next question. Though I want to take it back kind of down to the project level here and talk about how it's really challenging. You have a lot of these players all coming in together, and they all have to cooperate to make a single distributed energy project or a microgrid. I wonder, can you guys share a little bit about how you guys got everyone on the same page so that you can do projects like this?
Sure. So we understand and recognize that we cannot develop these complex projects from a business model, from technical standpoint, happen in a vacuum just as a utility. And we've been working with a number of entities, including our friends from Chicago, S&C Electric, and a number of national labs, and National Renewable Energy Lab, Argonne in our backyard, different universities, Northwestern, Illinois Institute of Technology, University of Denver, and different technologists to line up different experts in their own field to create a complete partnership ecosystem. So that partnership strategy, it's something that we develop at the beginning of the project, and we try to get everybody at the table. And I should say that it's not always the easiest way to make that conversation happen. there is a word like competition versus cooperation. That's something that everybody around the table learn along the way. But we have started doing that, and it's been a successful process. And we see that in future projects we will keep doing and creating these kind of collaborations.
Fantastic. Carl, what about you? How did you guys get everyone around the table and working together, to do this project that you guys are working on?
The short answer is budget. Nothing collaborates better than when you have budget for people to participate in a real project. And so we brought in some folks to apply for a grant to help with that budget, and even the process of putting together first a concept paper, then the full application, and then the process. You're already doing the conceptual architecture and formulating who's doing what. So in our Austin Shines project, one is we reached out to Austin-based Pecan Street, which is a R&D organization embedded in the University of Texas, and Austin Energy is one of the original co-founders of Pecan Street, and we've worked with them over the years. And when we think of, especially in the residential space, they're just natural go-to partners, so not much of a thought there. Reached out from some of the software applications to integrate the distributed energy resources and the battery, especially the grid battery implementations. A partner in Seattle called One Energy. They had a lot to bring to the table to this solution. We have an Austin-based smart inverter company called Ideal Power. They're actually a grant financial participant as well, so they're donating actually some of their technology as a key player to make a lot of this work. So I find it's not too hard to gather folks around. We have a really nice network of smart, capable organizations and people that we rely on. We don't have all the knowledge ourselves, and just as a strategy, of course, we have to rely on partners with their expertise to be successful.
Fantastic. David, I want to turn to you next. When you guys are partnering with utilities to move those microgrids from vision to reality, what are some of the toughest parts of actually doing it, and how do you get past them?
Well, we have a saying, if you've seen one microgrid, you've seen one microgrid, right? And as we look at it, the hardest part of the whole thing is, find me a place in the United States right now that is not electrified. And I'm sure all of you right now are thinking of a place, but still, in all of the United States, that's only what, 120, 130 places, and some of you are probably thinking of the same one. But the point is, everywhere we go, it's already electrified, and so we have to do brownfield projects all the time. We're constantly integrating with the older technology that I was telling you about at the beginning of my introduction. And so that part of it is always the hard part. You don't ever get to build a greenfield microgrid. It doesn't exist because it always has to interface with this grid that's already been developed. And that's the hard part because like when we worked at Encore and we did a microgrid for them, they forced us to use as many suppliers as they could possibly shoehorn into a project. Mm-hmm. So it's not that big a microgrid. It really isn't. It's nowhere near the size of the Bronzeville microgrid that Shay is building. But they shoehorned in 31 different suppliers into that project, and it was a royal pain in the butt to deal with that many people. That many cooks in the kitchen make for an ugly soup. But at the same time, the reason they did that is they said, when you got out into our grid, that's exactly what you're going to see. That is exactly what it's going to be like, and you're going to have to figure out that interoperability and to make it work. So, I mean, it was challenging, but at the same time, we did it. It was tough, but that's the two hard parts of it. It's very difficult, and this is where Jamie comes in to get a standard type developed. There's some organizations, IEEE out there working mm-hmm. to standardize some of that, but it's difficult. So the second one is you're always working in a brownfield type environment because you can't do a greenfield. And then the last one is there's a whole lot of legacy implementations and legacy systems that you have to interact with when you're doing it. So go in with your eyes wide open. Hopefully you won't have 31 different people to deal with, but yeah, you're gonna have a number of them.
Yeah. And I should say about this Encore microgrid, we've done a little reporting on it, and they really they did that by design, just because they wanted to bring as many people as they could in, like you said, so that they could learn how to work with everyone and kind of get it all out of the way in one go. So. Oh
yeah, just the number of communications protocols we had to use because of that was crazy. But anyway.
In any case, Jamie, what about you? How does how can the peer ratings help people kind of come together around the same goals and make these visions a reality?
Well, and that's what you just said is exactly how is using a more or less mutually agreed upon standard and agreeing. You have 31 suppliers, 31 vendors of some form or another. Everyone's building to this, so that when the project is over, you know who carried the water. Who took care of what they needed to take care of, and then you can hold accountable throughout the process people that aren't doing what they need to do. Now, that's the worst case. The best case scenario is you have a roadmap to build to a level like Encore, which is a really remarkable project, and there's so much opportunity out there. We should be doing it right. We should be doing it with rigor and metrics and be definitional about it so that the investors actually have something to look at and know what they're talking about, know what their customers are talking about, and know that they're getting what they pay for. So
fantastic. I want to bring it back to a little bit of a higher level for you guys now. When we talk about why are we doing all of this anyway? Of course it's customers are demanding more distributed energy and more new technologies on their side of the meter. But it's also I think big underlying motivation for that, and also for why utilities and policymakers are pushing for this, is environmentalism, right? You want these things are going to be essential in making a cleaner grid for the 21st century, right? And I wonder if we can try to connect the dots for the audience. How does learning more about this single microgrid, and maybe in Bronzeville, or I guess it's two, but how does learning more about these microgrids and deploying these pilot projects, how at the end of the process, how does it get you to take more fossil fuels off the grid to make a cleaner and more responsible energy system?
So that's a very good question. In terms of generation mix, we start from diesel and fossil fuel generation and all the way to the greenest and most sophisticated type, and it comes with a price tag. And like everything else in life, affordability is something that we have to take care of. So the balance between getting those renewable energy within the system, taking care of it, and operating them in a reliable manner after cold start events, or when the system is up or down, or islanded mode, it's a challenge. It's a very difficult problem to solve. What we've done at ComEd is we have developed a tool that's a feasibility study tool that we have a patent for it in-house. And the thought is as an input, the system or the tool gets lots of different factors related to generation, CHPs and different types of energy storage, solar, wind, geothermal, and then the historical reliability information of that footprint. And the output of the system is, first of all, the financial viability, and then second, most importantly, the generation mix. So we can operate that system with the most amount of renewable energy or low emission type resources, and doing it in a safe and reliable manner.
Fantastic. Carl, what about you? How are these projects going to help you clean up your grid?
Well, I mean, people here from Austin know the community and culture here. We have a culture, and we are community owned, not employee owned, but we were established in 1895, so we might have you by a few years.
Yeah, you do. Wow.
So our stakeholder, it isn't shareholder value in the traditional sense. It's about being a reflection of our community, and our community as a culture wants a sustainable future. And so part of that is in a very aggressive climate and generation plan with the 55% renewables. But anyone at the utility thinks once we hit 55%, our community is saying, well, that's good, that's pretty balanced, and we're done. I think it's kind of fooling themselves. Also, from a bigger picture, is we as a city, and not city as in City of Austin employees, but we as a over 1 million people city, we do have a past resolution and goal to be net zero by 2050. And so when you look at so CO2, zero CO2 emissions as a city, so that's a big order, and that's a big vision type thing that, some people, well, how is that really going to work and wrap your head around? If you look at our greenhouse gas emissions in our territory, there's two big gorillas that take up about 85% of those emissions. So one is electricity generation, and so how the SHINES program and DERs and these solar goals help us get that emission down and down and down to ultimately a zero state, really is what the vision of 2050 is. And then it's transportation. And so that's another thing we're working a lot on with the transportation electrification component of that, because we still expect, whether they're autonomous or not, individual vehicles will still be in our territory. So wouldn't it make more sense to have those, instead of being fossil fueled, is having those vehicles plugging into a 100% renewable energy source, is what we do today. With our plug-in everywhere infrastructure, so I'll give a quick plug to that. It's about 250 stations, and they're all powered by our Green Choice Renewable Energy Credit program to really drive that mission about the sustainable transportation, electrification, and fuel. We have another program at the airport with ground service equipment. We have a specific multifamily. So really, we as a utility need to do everything we possibly can if we're truly representing the vision and community of our leaders to not only clean up the electrical grid, but also promote a new, cleaner way of driving around town.
Fantastic. David, what do you think? How are these DER projects that you guys work on? How do they relate to sustainability?
Yeah, for us, we look at it as it's a tidal wave that's coming with distributed energy resources. So as you're going through it, it's going to get more to the edge, and as it gets more to the edge, when you add smart switches and smart devices in there, it turns into unintentional microgrids, because you already have the generation there, you have the ability to sectionalize on the grid, and as a result, you'll have these grid of microgrids that form just because of how the grid is changing. And so from our perspective, that distributed energy generation is probably going to be renewable, right, as it gets out there, because like Austin, there's a lot of places that have similar, not as stringent, but similar type visions and goals. So as it gets that way, you're going to have to be able to control it better and understand it. So energy storage, smart switches, all these types of things add that level of control into it that'll make it more of a reality. So that's what we see it, how it's going to work, and we're excited about it.
And obviously, as the greenie on the panel, it's a pretty obvious answer for me, but I will say a few things that are I think, relevant here. One, we are obviously functioning in this space from a mission-driven perspective to try and encourage clean energy development across the board. But we need expertise of people like S&C Electric, who is our first peer partner, looking at how this actually gets operationalized. And so David was very good about pulling us into how do we think about this from a business perspective and from a reality perspective. And so we're lucky to have him, and would love all the expertise from the industry we can get to start to implement that mission. And I will also add that when we look at Chattanooga, which, as I said, is one of our first certified projects, their SOx, NOx, and carbon intensity is, for each of those, 20 to 30% lower than the whole state of Tennessee because of the interventions that they've made in their grid. So it is possible. Tennessee is a pretty coal-intensive state. There's a lot of opportunity there, and what they've been able to do is work with some of their big customers, one of whom has a solar farm in their territory, to feed back into that grid. And so there are solutions and there's opportunity, and we just want to be a part of it and help folks get to the next place.
Fantastic. Well, we're running up on time here, but before we go, I got to ask you, the big vision question about this. We hear about the more distributed nature of the grid all the time, but do y'all think that, the grid of the future is going to be just a network of microgrids with, people on, in their neighborhoods sharing energy and then exporting it to another energy via the larger grid? How do you guys see this evolving? Real quick, because they got to get to lunch.
So if you like wind or renewable energy, you got to like transmission line. For the stability of the system, we need big nuclear plants. And at the same time, distributed energy resources is going to play a huge role in localized area. The centralized control is not going to go away, and it's not going to get replaced with decentralized. So the way at least I see the future, is a hybrid model that in pocketed area, when it makes sense from a resiliency, security, financially purposes, these pocketed nanogrids or microgrids that are connected to a bigger, larger grid.
So that hybrid model. Carl, what do you think? Do you think about the hybrid model too?
Well, the key is not one or the other. The key is what's the right balance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep, and we have the same idea. We call it layered intelligence in the system. So you have layered control, centralized, decentralized, but intelligence throughout, both in how it operates and how you plan it.
Fantastic. And Jamie, what do you think?
I think that the mix, the hybrid approach seems like the direction we're trending. But we'll see in 20 to 30 years what actually gets shaken out, because I think we're at a tipping point right now.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a great cliffhanger to leave the audience on. Thank you all for dealing with us up here in our chumminess. Let's hear it for this great panel. They've been absolutely excellent.
Thanks, Gavin.
Fantastic. Well, thank each and every one of you for being here. Let's get lunch.